The McLaren was idle at the light, its matte black frame gleaming like obsidian beneath the Georgia sun. It didn't roar. It purred, low, expensive, and disinterested in the world around it. Behind the wheel, a black man in a charcoal gray suit sat completely still, fingers resting gently on the leather trim, eyes tracking the street ahead like he was reading it, not watching it. He had the calm of someone who'd seen too much and the silence of someone who didn't need to prove anything to anyone. But someone still needed to prove something to him. The moment the light flicked green, a piercing siren shattered the calm. Blue and red lights bled across the windshield. The man didn't flinch. He just eased the car to the curb and reached for the window switch. The officer didn't wait. He was already at the driver's side, hand on his holster, jaw clenched. His badge read Maddox, and his voice came out coated in suspicion and something else, something colder. "Step out of the vehicle," he said, eyes narrowing like the words tasted sour. "You don't belong in this car." The driver blinked once, slowly. "I'm sorry, officer," he replied, voice steady. "Could you clarify that?" "This vehicle," Maddox snapped, gesturing at the sleek machine like it had committed a crime on its own, "matches the description of a stolen car. I need you to place your hands on the hood." A crowd began to gather. It always does when something doesn't look right. Phones emerged. Thumbs hovered over record buttons. Some knew the look, the setup. The driver complied, without protest, without panic. His hands, smooth and sure, rested on the hood that had cost more than most houses in the city. Inside the car, beneath the passenger seat, a leather folder sat sealed tight. Embossed on the cover was a gold emblem, United States Department of Justice. But Officer Maddox didn't know that yet. He didn't know the man he was handcuffing was on a federal assignment. Didn't know this was part of a racial profiling investigation. Didn't know that every second was being documented, not just by the crowd, but by the man himself. This wasn't just a traffic stop, it was a trap. And Officer Maddox had just stepped into it. He was about to become Exhibit A in a civil rights investigation. His body cam footage, if it survived, would be played in courtrooms, classrooms, and newsrooms. His words, already viral, would headline stories on police misconduct, racial bias, and abuse of power. But in that moment, he still believed he was in control. And the man in the suit? He just lowered his head slightly and said one sentence. "Officer, you have no idea who you're talking to." The trap had been triggered. And justice was already on its way. Deshaun Carter knew better than to react. His pulse stayed even as the cuffs locked around his wrists, the cold steel clicking against bone with practiced indifference. It wasn't the first time he'd felt that grip, not personally, but in every file he'd reviewed, every complaint he'd dissected at 2 a.m. with nothing but coffee and outrage to keep him going. Still, this one hit different. Because this time the experiment wasn't theoretical. This time, he was the data point. Officer Maddox's voice grated in his ear as he ordered him toward the patrol car. The crowd murmured. A few people gasped. Someone whispered, "Ain't that the guy from the city paper last month?" Deshaun kept his eyes forward. He didn't nod, didn't confirm, didn't deny. His job depended on silence, until it didn't. He was driven to the precinct like any other suspect, booked without a name check, fingerprinted without cause. There was no call to a lawyer, nor was a Miranda warning given. Just an assumption, one that matched a pattern he'd seen too many times. His driver's license sat untouched in his wallet. They hadn't asked for it. They didn't want to be proven wrong too early. 3 hours passed in holding. He sat on a steel bench with peeling gray paint and a flickering light above. He studied the cracks in the floor like they might confess something. But his mind was elsewhere, on the hidden camera embedded in his lapel, streaming everything back to Washington, D.C., where his team watched every second unfold in real time. This wasn't a routine check. It was the 4th stop this month by the same officer. 4 black men, 4 stolen cars, 0 apologies. Deshawn had arrived in Atlanta under direct orders from the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. A surge in citizen reports had flagged this district for an internal audit, but when internal resistance stonewalled the probe, DOJ switched to its last resort, covert deployment. Deshawn wasn't just leading the case, he was the case. On paper, he was Cameron Hayes, a private investor with a taste for speed and bad timing. In truth, he was a federal special investigator embedded to confirm a disturbing theory, that this district had cultivated a culture of unchecked authority, one that weaponized racial profiling as routine. The data said yes. The people said worse. His arrest wasn't unexpected. It was necessary. A calculated risk designed to expose patterns in the department's enforcement behavior. But something had shifted in the air today. Maddox hadn't just stopped him. He had escalated, quickly, violently, like he wasn't afraid of consequences. That, more than the unlawful search or the slammed cuffs, bothered Deshawn most. The officer wasn't acting out of fear, he was acting out of comfort, like this wasn't the first time, like he knew he'd get away with it. Meanwhile, in a small office building 5 blocks away, a woman named Tasha Nguyen refreshed her Twitter feed. Again. Then again. The video from the parking lot had exploded, 700,000 views in under 2 hours. "He doesn't belong in this car," the caption read. "He does now." Hashtags bloomed like wildflowers. Driving. While black, sash, body cam footage. Wrongfully arrested. Civil rights. Investigation. Tasha wasn't just a journalist. She was the one who tipped off the DOJ in the first place. Months ago, she had compiled a private database of civilian videos documenting dozens of unlawful stops. Most were dismissed. Some were deleted. A few went viral but fizzled without follow-up. Until one clip, Officer Maddox pulling a father out of his minivan at gunpoint in front of his children, landed in her inbox. She didn't send it to the news. She sent it to Washington. Now she watched with a mix of dread and vindication as the story she'd started took on a life of its own. But something was missing. The man in the video, the one in the McLaren, wasn't just another target. His posture, his voice, the way he spoke even while cuffed, it didn't fit. Tasha had spent her career learning how to read between the lines. And something about him told her this wasn't random. This was precision. Back at the station, Deshawn finally spoke. Not to plead, not to fight, but to request water, calmly, politely, as if he were asking from a boardroom, not a bench. The officer outside his cell gave him a blank look and walked away. The message was clear. You're not welcome here. You're not safe here. But Deshawn had already made peace with that. Because this wasn't about safety. This was about strategy. From his inner pocket, he retrieved a thin object sealed in Kevlar lining. It looked like a pen. It wasn't. A press of the clip, and a signal was sent. Not to local authorities, not to family, but to a secure DOJ server that marked the end of Phase 1. Arrest achieved. Next, full exposure. The moment the signal was sent, the game changed. But only for those who knew the rules. Officer Maddox didn't. He still walked the hallways of the precinct like he owned the place, shoulders squared, chin high, unaware that every step he took was leaving footprints on federal ground. His swagger, once rehearsed and localized, was now archived across secure DOJ servers, time-stamped, geo-tagged, and accompanied by high-definition audio captured from the mic sewn into Deshawn's jacket lining. Evidence collected in silence. Truth built in the shadows. Inside, holding Deshawn, leaned back against the cold cinder-block wall. His cuffed hands rested on his lap, calm and deliberate. He wasn't counting minutes. He was counting mistakes. Maddox had made 3 already. First, no legal reason for the stop. Second, no documentation of the arrest. Third, and most damning, no attempt to verify Deshawn's identity. It was no longer just wrongful arrest. It was willful negligence, and in a federal case, that distinction meant everything. Outside the precinct, news had spread. The video from the street was now running on local stations. The caption changed. Man arrested for driving while black. Anchor voices danced around legal terms: racial profiling, abuse of authority, excessive force. But the narrative had begun to write itself. It wasn't just about the car anymore. It was about the culture. Meanwhile, in the mayor's office downtown, a red light blinked on a secure phone line. The voice on the other end was tight, clinical, and carried a Washington, D.C. zip code. Ma'am, one of our investigators was unlawfully detained in your city. We advise full cooperation from this point forward. That was the moment the dominoes started to fall. Back at the precinct, Maddox swaggered back into the booking room with a smirk on his face. He slapped a file onto the desk, pretending to review something. Anything. In reality, he was stalling. The moment he checked the glove box of the McLaren, he found a DOJ-issued ID, but instead of escalating it to a supervisor, he slipped it into his pocket. That was his fourth mistake, concealing federal credentials. He looked through the glass at Deshawn, then leaned toward the intercom. You know, he said slowly, voice dripping with misplaced confidence. Guys like you always act calm, like the rules are on your side. But in the real world, we make the rules. Deshawn didn't respond. He didn't flinch. He just lifted his eyes, cold, precise, unmoved, and let the silence answer. Maddox didn't know it yet, but that moment would cost him everything, because the mic was still hot, the footage was still live, and across the city, people were still watching. In the tech room upstairs, a junior officer named Malik Reyes stared at a screen. He wasn't supposed to be there, but he'd heard rumors for months, rumors about traffic stops that went unreported, body cam footage that mysteriously vanished, arrest logs that didn't match patrol logs. He'd joined the force to protect people, not to bury them. He pulled up the stream from Maddox's patrol unit, keyed in the internal override code, and saw the footage. The stop, the confrontation, the shove, the cuffs. He froze the frame on Deshawn's face, zoomed in, and caught a glimpse of the DOJ badge peeking from under the seat. His breath caught. He knew what that meant. And he knew he had a choice: look away or leak it. 5 minutes later, an anonymous file was uploaded to a secure civil rights server maintained by the DOJ's Internal Oversight Task Force. 10 minutes after that, the file was duplicated to a protected Dropbox and sent to a law firm known for class action suits against law enforcement. While chaos simmered beneath the surface, Maddox continued playing the part of a confident man. But even he started to feel it, the sideways glances from fellow officers, the sudden silence when he walked into a room. The pressure had shifted. The air was no longer on his side. Deshawn stood up, calm as ever, and walked past Maddox without a word. The hallway was quiet. Every door he passed led to a system that had tried to crush him and failed. This wasn't just about his dignity. This was about federal oversight and how deeply the system was cracking. At 7:42 p.m., a verified DOJ account posted a 90-second compilation across multiple government servers and press outlets. The footage was time-stamped, uncut, and horrifying. Maddox's voice rang clear. "You don't belong in this car." Then came the unlawful commands, the forceful grab, the shove, and finally, the silent compliance of a man who knew he was bait. What the public didn't know was that the footage wasn't just from Maddox's body cam. It was synced with 3 other cameras: bystanders, patrol dash cam, and a hidden DOJ device. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was a mosaic of misconduct. The internet erupted. Hashtags trended within minutes. Hashtag body cam footage. Hashtag police misconduct. Civil rights now. RPM soared on search platforms. Networks scrambled for interviews, but Deshawn remained silent. Let the facts speak. The next morning, 3 black Suburbans pulled up to the station. Inside were members of the DOJ's Civil Rights Division, Office of the Inspector General, and 2 federal prosecutors. They didn't knock. They didn't call ahead. They walked in with sealed subpoenas, data warrants, and authority that made the front desk freeze mid-sentence. Maddox was still on shift. He didn't even have time to delete his texts. They went for his locker first, then his body cam logs, then his personal phone. One agent calmly informed him, "You're not under arrest. Yet. But your badge is now property of the federal government." Maddox didn't blink. He looked around, but no one stepped in. Even Harlan stayed behind the glass. He knew this moment was coming. He just didn't expect it this soon. 2 weeks earlier, Deshawn's internal DOJ team had received a tip that Harlan was ordering internal IT purges to erase questionable stops from the precinct's database. What Harlan didn't know was that the city's cloud backup system had an automatic sync every 48 hours, off-site and untouchable. When the agents logged into the archive, they uncovered a goldmine. Over 60 deleted traffic stop recordings, almost all involving people of color, none of which were reported in official logs. The timestamps, officer tags, and digital audit trails were intact. One of those stops, just 2 months ago, showed Maddox pulling over a 16-year-old Latino boy, accusing him of joyriding his mother's SUV. No warning, no paperwork, just fear. The clip went public that night, and the city couldn't look away. Atlanta's mayor stepped onto the podium that evening, flanked by city officials in polished suits and rigid expressions. The press conference was meant to restore public trust in the police force. Instead, it ignited a firestorm. When a reporter asked whether the mayor had prior knowledge of complaints against Officer Maddox, her hesitation spoke louder than any statement. Moments later, a journalist from an independent outlet held up a document, an internal memo from 3 months prior, highlighting Maddox's misconduct, signed and time-stamped by the mayor's office. The cameras flashed like a firing squad. The mayor's carefully scripted answers crumbled. Her political tone shifted from assurance to desperation. She tried to pivot, suggesting full cooperation with the Department of Justice, but by then, her silence had already gone viral. On YouTube, the clip was titled, "You Knew and You Let It Happen." 1 million views, 10 million impressions, and climbing. Back at the precinct, Captain Greg Harlan knew the walls were closing in. Surveillance footage caught him entering the evidence room at 3:14 a.m., attempting to retrieve his personal laptop, something he wasn't authorized to store there in the first place. What he didn't know was that the DOJ task force had already installed motion-triggered cameras. Within an hour, agents confronted him with still frames, one with him reaching for the locker, another as he inserted a flash drive, and one final shot, his badge frozen mid-air as he tried to walk out. They didn't need to detain him, they just handed him a form. "You are now a subject in an active federal obstruction investigation." His response? "I was trying to protect my department." But no one believed that anymore. The footage spoke louder than loyalty. Harlan wasn't the shield, he was the rot. On the 3rd Thursday of the month, Deshawn walked into the Capitol. Not in a suit, but in a plain gray shirt and slacks. No security detail, no media entourage, just a man with a folder and a mission. Inside that folder were transcripts, call logs, and documented racial disparities in traffic stops conducted by the same department that had arrested him. Before the Congressional Civil Rights Subcommittee, he didn't dramatize his arrest. He deconstructed it. "What happened to me was not a malfunction of the system," he said calmly. "It was the system, built that way, maintained that way, rewarded that way." His words echoed through the chamber. Lawmakers leaned forward. Even those who had once been indifferent now stared in stunned silence. He spoke of data, but more than that, of dignity. And when he ended with, "If I belonged in cuffs, the question isn't who I am. It's who they are." The room stayed silent for several beats before erupting in applause. An internal disciplinary hearing was held under the radar, meant to quietly review Officer Maddox's use of force without public involvement. But someone leaked the live stream link. Within an hour, over 200,000 people were watching. The DOJ played a composite video of Maddox's language across 12 stops. Slurs, taunts, threats, all documented. Then came the moment everyone waited for, Deshawn's silent restraint juxtaposed with Maddox's violent escalation. One officer on the panel tried to defend the conduct. High-risk stops require intensity. A black female sergeant in the room snapped back. So do high standards, and this department has neither. Twitter exploded. #No more excuses trended nationwide. The hearing adjourned in disgrace. A digital forensics team recovered a corrupted body cam segment, never meant to see daylight. It caught Maddox pacing in his squad car after the arrest, muttering into his private phone, "I don't care who he is. These people need to be reminded who runs the streets." He then laughed, adding, "If this goes bad, Harlan will bury it." That line changed everything. The video wasn't just misconduct. It was a confession of intentional racial targeting and a coordinated cover-up. DOJ prosecutors filed an emergency motion to seize all of Harlan's devices. A federal judge signed it in under an hour. The storm had a voice now, and it sounded like guilt. By the third weekend, protests flooded the city, again. But this time, they didn't come with chants alone. They brought screens. Giant LED trucks circled City Hall, playing Maddox's footage 24/7. QR codes on banners linked directly to DOJ reports. Every speaker quoted policy. Every marcher knew the civil rights statute number by heart. When riot officers appeared, the protesters held up tablets and said, "We're not fighting you, we're teaching you." That moment made the evening news in 27 states. CNN called it the most informed protest in American history. This wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about reclaiming power through truth. 3 weeks after the initial stop, the DOJ called a press conference on the steps of the federal courthouse. Cameras lined the lawn. Deshawn Carter approached the podium in a Navy suit. No notes, no entourage, just truth. He looked out across a sea of flashing lights and said only one sentence, "I belong everywhere justice is needed." Then he stepped aside. Behind him, the DOJ director took the mic and confirmed that multiple indictments were filed against Officer Maddox, Captain Harlan, and 2 additional officers in the Atlanta precinct for civil rights violations, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to suppress evidence. Every network aired it, every paper printed it. That sentence, "I belong everywhere justice is needed," was immortalized on murals, shirts, courtrooms, and classrooms. The badge hadn't been stripped from Deshawn. It had been sharpened. In the days following the press conference, the world thought they'd seen the end of it. Headlines had hit their peaks, protests were slowing, and politicians were already shifting attention to the next crisis. But Deshawn Carter hadn't come this far just to punish one bad cop. He was never after vengeance. What he wanted was transformation. And for that, he needed the system itself to look in the mirror. Quietly, without fanfare, Deshawn returned to Washington. No interviews, no op-eds, just a sealed briefcase containing a classified memo titled Federal Oversight Recommendations, Georgia Pilot Program. Inside were 78 pages of case law, statistical breakdowns, digital evidence archives, and one central proposal: place the entire Atlanta precinct under temporary DOJ supervision. It was radical, unprecedented, and fully legal. The memo included a timeline of Maddox's behavior, internal emails from Harlan, deleted body cam recoveries, and sworn statements from whistleblowers, all documented and chain of custody verified. The goal wasn't retribution, it was federal reform enforcement through civilian review boards, independent tech monitoring, and racial bias retraining mandated by consent decree. Deshawn's signature at the bottom of the memo was followed by 7 more, including that of the Attorney General of the United States. While cable news moved on to other stories, Deshawn's legal team filed a quiet petition in federal court. The target? Not Maddox, not even Harlan. It was the city of Atlanta itself, for negligent supervision of sworn officers engaged in repeated acts of racial profiling and civil rights violations under color of law. The case name sent chills through the legal world. Carter v. City of Atlanta, United States Department of Justice. Oversight request, docket 21, 1N42. It wasn't a civil lawsuit. It was a structural challenge to how policing was administered in the region, and it was backed by federal precedent. The response from city leadership came fast and desperate. They offered settlements, PR tours, a community roundtable moderated by celebrities. But Deshawn refused all of it. He didn't want apologies. He wanted infrastructure. Then came the twist no one expected. At a closed-door Senate subcommittee briefing, Deshawn testified one last time, not as a victim, but as an architect. He revealed that his arrest wasn't just an accident caught on camera. It was the final phase of Operation Mirror Protocol, a years-long covert DOJ initiative that placed high-ranking civil rights investigators undercover across the country. Their mission: infiltrate the day-to-day experience of being black in America with institutional credibility, not just statistics. You cannot legislate empathy, Deshawn told them, but you can document injustice until the law has no choice but to follow. The room sat frozen. He continued, I was never afraid of Maddox. I was afraid of how normal his behavior felt to him. He pulled out one last file, a sealed envelope marked Internal DOJ Only. Inside was a compiled list of 47 similar precincts across the country, each flagged with internal risk codes and already under quiet investigation. The Atlanta case, he explained, was the pilot. The results would be used to determine how fast other cities would face oversight or collapse from within. The silence broke when a senator from Illinois said flatly, Mr. Carter, what you're proposing isn't oversight. It's a complete redesign. Deshawn didn't blink. Exactly. That moment was never aired on television, but the leaked transcript would later appear in an exposé published by The New Yorker titled, The Man Who Rewired the Justice Playbook. Harlan's case came next, but he never made it to court. Days before his arraignment, he struck a plea deal and agreed to testify against a network of commanders complicit in suppressing evidence across 3 counties. He lost everything: title, pension, clearance. His name is now listed on the DOJ's blacklist, shared with every police agency in the nation. And as for the city of Atlanta, the court ruled in favor of federal oversight for an initial term of 5 years, making it the first municipality in the country to be subjected to full civilian audit authority in modern policing history. But the most stunning response came not in the courtroom or on the steps of Capitol Hill, but from classrooms. Deshawn's case was entered into university law curricula nationwide as a core study in civil rights litigation, policing ethics, and systemic accountability. His story became a symbol, not of suffering, but of strategic resistance. He never asked for fame, never sat for a profile piece, never claimed the title of activist. Instead, he returned to the DOJ, took on a new identity, and began preparing the next case. Because for him, justice was not an event. It was a mission, and he wasn't done. As he left Atlanta one final time, walking past the exact intersection where his life was almost derailed, a young black boy with a notebook in hand ran up to him. "Are you the guy from the video?" the boy asked. Deshawn smiled, knelt down, and handed him a card. It read, "Ask better questions, carry a camera, never let silence be your answer." The boy grinned. Deshawn walked away, and the work continued. Same cracked sidewalks, same corner store with the peeling paint and flickering neon sign. But something in the air had shifted, like history had passed through here and left behind a silence that was fuller, not emptier. Deshawn Carter stood quietly at the edge of the intersection where it all began. His car wasn't flashy this time, just a black government-issued sedan, engine off, parked out of the way. He wasn't here to be seen. He was here to feel. Across the street, life moved on. A bus hissed to a stop. A mother clutched her toddler's hand as they crossed. A teenager skateboarded past, earbuds in, lost in music louder than the world. No one recognized him. No one stopped him. That was the point. For the first time, this space no longer whispered that he didn't belong. He thought about everything that had happened: the arrest, the backlash, the strategy, the exposure, the indictments, the victory. But those weren't the memories that stayed with him. What stayed were the details most people missed. The way Maddox looked at him, like ownership, not law, was being challenged. The way the cuffs cut deeper, not because of the metal, but because of the assumption. The moment he realized no badge, no education, no record of public service would ever protect him from being misread and misunderstood. And yet, that was also the moment he realized something more powerful. His silence had power. His calm had weight. And his presence, weaponless, wordless, unshakable, had triggered a reckoning across the country. Deshawn didn't just win a case. He proved that dignity is data, that a quiet refusal to conform to disrespect can ripple louder than rage, that body cam footage and wrongful arrest aren't just viral headlines. They are calls to rewire how justice sees, speaks, and serves. A soft voice interrupted his thoughts. "Mr. Carter?" He turned. A black woman in her late 40s stood beside him, holding a grocery bag in one hand, a cell phone in the other. "I just wanted to say thank you. My son's in the academy now, but after what happened to you, he knows how to see people. You taught him that." Deshawn smiled gently. "No, ma'am," he said. "You did." She nodded. A car horn in the distance. Life is calling them back. As she walked away, Deshawn looked up at the sky. Clear, open, unafraid. For years, he'd worked to dismantle systems from the inside, patient, methodical, invisible. But sometimes it took being seen for real change to begin. He didn't belong in that car, they said. But the truth was, he didn't just belong there. He belonged everywhere justice had been delayed, misapplied, or denied. And now, so did his story. Because injustice once filmed can be erased. But dignity, once witnessed, lives forever.